years and 14 days after Dr. King was assassinated, I'm tasked with addressing the very important topic, mass incarceration and its impact on communities of color. The truth is that, like slavery, mass incarceration has had a devastating impact on black people in America.
Yes, sir.
The issue of mass incarceration is one that is inextricably linked to this nation's sordid history of slavery, racism, black codes, Jim Crow, racial discrimination, and white privilege. The reality is mass incarceration runs rampant amongst the black community, and it is a fundamental barrier in America when it comes to the ability of black people, black males in particular, to achieve the American dream, which is our right in this country, the land of the free and the home of the brave. The cold reality is that America has locked up a vast number of its people, especially people in communities of color. It's always refreshing to hear from a gentleman like Mr. Omar Howard, who introduced me, who has been through the system and come out and has not let it destroy him, but has used it as a positive experience to uplift himself so that he's now in a position to give back to the people. Let's give Brother Omar Muhammad and I were just talking this morning about how important it is for those of us who have something to lose by associating with those who may not have the trust of society at large, how important it is for us to not be afraid to affiliate and associate and to work with people who are best able to talk with our young people, because we don't know what our young people are going through. But these guys and these women who've been through the system, they know what's in store. And we need to all be working together to help save our young people and help channel them in positive directions.
That's right.
Jail and prison have become such the norm in our communities that it seems like our ordinary life experience. Isn't that something?
Yes, sir.
It's either violence or it's one or the other or both. And most of the times it's both. We deal with that in our families and in our communities on a regular basis. People getting shot, people getting killed, people going to jail, people going to prison. It's almost, we're in post-traumatic stress about it. It doesn't even have the impact that it perhaps once did. It's not shocking. It's our ordinary life experience, especially if you are poor and lack education. The data show that lack of education, poverty, and crime have a direct correlation. We are more likely to become incarcerated when there are disparities in our educational opportunities. Less education, less employment opportunities, less income, more prone to commit crime. Add in a gallon of the war on drugs, stir in a quart of lack of hope, and add 20 spoonfuls of fear from the pervasive, excessive use of force by the police, and you have the stew of mass incarceration. Even though we make up only 13% of the population, black people make up 40% of America's incarcerated population, according to the Constitutional Rights Foundation. That means that 2 out of every 5 black people are incarcerated. This recipe has dire consequences on our communities and on the greater society. This is truly a human rights issue.
Yes, it is.
Dr. King preached his I Have a Dream sermon from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963. And at the end of that sermon, he uttered the words that are etched in stone as his epitaph on his memorial, quote, "Free at last. Mass incarceration threatens to cause Dr. King's dream and words to ring hollow, while the futures of many young, gifted, and black people are stifled as fathers, brothers, cousins, uncles, and close family friends are caught up on lockdown. Right now, almost 2.3 million Americans are behind bars. Our rate of incarceration is twice that of Brazil, 4 times that of Australia, and almost 10 times that of Germany. 40% of those 2.3 million Americans, as I said, on lockdown are black, and that's almost 1 million black husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters who won't be going to college, won't be going to get a job, who won't be supporting their families. There are thousands of children in this country with incarcerated parents, and these children are far more likely to end up incarcerated themselves. The trauma that families and communities bear from incarceration are devastating, affecting future generations and perpetuating economic inequality and the inability to advance within society. Mandatory minimums for nonviolent drug offenses have wreaked havoc on our communities. Even as states and localities are legalizing or easing restrictions on marijuana, thousands of black Americans sit in prisons and jails serving time for possession. A generation and a half ago, as crack cocaine became epidemic in our communities, politicians got tough on crime with 3 strikes and you're out. And in Georgia, 2 strikes and you're out with a life sentence. As a result of the scourge of crack cocaine, literally millions of black people became convicted felons, suffering that stigma and its associated lifetime punishment. Today, politicians, in response to the opioid epidemic that has afflicted so many in their communities, have declared not a criminal justice crisis, that's right, but a public health emergency. Not with jail and prison, but with love and drug treatment. While those addicted to crack cocaine continue to get locked up, in the federal system there's an 18-to-1 disparity between the sentence one gets for powder cocaine and the sentence a black person receives for possessing the same amount of crack cocaine. Criminal justice reforms brought the disparity that was once at 100-to-1 down to 18-to-1. That's only been a couple of years ago. But the 18-to-1 racist disparity still remains. We will continue to work to get Congress to get rid of that disparity, which disproportionately and adversely impacts black people. Law enforcement has exacerbated the divide in the system of justice in America, and I know we have many of our law enforcement personnel here today. Let's give them a hand for keeping our community safe. But every place is not like DeKalb County.
I know you're right.
Over-policing of black and brown people is pervasive and persistent. Racial profiling is in many jurisdictions standard practice. Stop and frisk tactics and arrest quotas are still disproportionately affecting black people. The use of deadly force by law enforcement against black people is far higher than it is against white people. Why is it that a 12-year-old black boy in Cincinnati playing with a toy gun can be wrongfully killed by an officer with a hair trigger finger, while a white boy in Florida can enter a school, murder 17 of his classmates, and be arrested without injury? How can it be that an unarmed black man in San Francisco can be shot and killed on his grandmama's patio for having a phone in his hand, while Dylan Roof, after shooting 9 black people to death in a church in North Charleston, is taking the Burger King for a Happy Meal before he's delivered to jail? We cannot ignore the new mask that oppression wears today. We can't ignore racism cloaked in black robes on the benches of courthouses across the nation. Just recently, we saw Paul Manafort convicted of tax and bank fraud to the tune of $35 million, get 43 months from Judge T.S. Elliott, who at sentencing said that Manafort deserved a break for the exemplary life that he led, accumulating those ill-gotten millions of dollars before he got caught. That same Judge Elliott showed no mercy to former Louisiana Congressman William Jefferson. Y'all remember that?
Yes, sir.
90,000 in the freezer.
Right.
He sent Bill Jefferson to prison for 13 years for $90,000. $90,000 was peanuts to Paul Manafort, who spent $90,000 just on a few suits, plus that $15,000 ostrich jacket. Manafort made millions and got 43 months, while Jefferson took $100K and got 156 months. That kind of sentencing disparity, ladies and gentlemen, takes place every day in and day out in the criminal justice system throughout America. Free at last? I won't extend this talk with a dissertation on the evils of the prison industrial complex and the rise of the private for-profit prison industry and how it feasts on blacks and especially brown people at this time. The history of the United States of America is a story, ladies and gentlemen, that cannot be uncoupled from the institutionalization of oppression. Our nation, built on revolutionary ideas and incredible injustice, was built on the shoulders of black men and women. Black folks' sweat and blood nourishing the tobacco and cotton fields that enabled our nation to prosper. People like to distance themselves from the idea that racism and inequality still exist, pointing to slavery as a distant sin 150 years in our past, something that we as a people should have gotten over long before now. President Obama got elected, and people really feel that if that could happen, then there is no more racism. And so polls show that most people don't understand that there is a poverty gap between blacks and whites. They believe that everything is equal when in fact the average net worth and income of a black family is only 10% of that of a white family. I mean, the disparity is great, and it exists. People don't believe that it exists, and if you don't believe that it exists, then you see no need to remedy the problem.
That's right.
You just ignore it, and everything will continue to go as it has for the last 150 years. So when you hear people talking about reparations, it's not about cutting checks
to
people.
No, sir.
Putting cash money in black folks' pocket.
Not at all.
Because after all, they are always wanting something for nothing. Reparations is about the systemic difficulties that exist that need to be dealt with in society, and it's going to cost. We at least need to study what the ramifications of reparations would be and how it could be handled and how much it would cost. We at least need to have that conversation in this country.
Yes, sir.
I'm glad that we have policymakers now discussing it. We got legislation that has been introduced in the House, as it has been year after year, John Conyers. So here in Georgia, we know that racism and injustice don't just live in our history textbooks. Here in Georgia, just 4 short months ago, we witnessed the theft. Since we're talking criminal justice reform, we witnessed the theft of an election.
Yes, we did.
Somebody need to go to jail. But instead, they're in the governor's office. We saw voter suppression tactics aimed squarely at black voters. And by the way, what county was it down there in Georgia a couple of years ago that a group of NAACP people, I believe, got prosecuted? They were all acquitted, but they got run through the ringer just by trying to register people to vote and helping them with their voting. They got prosecuted. But there'll be no prosecution for the theft of the 2018 election. They won. Racism is not dead in Georgia, and it exists throughout America. And mass incarceration is the ugly and vicious manifestation of that racism. Make no mistake about it, black people have made and continue to make tremendous progress in America. Through prayer and sheer perseverance. Look at how far we've come.
Yes, sir.
For the first time in history, we have 56 black American members in the U.S. House of Representatives. Finally, a number large enough to reflect our general population. And last year, Congress passed what's known as the First Step Act, which was a small but first step in the quest to pass significant criminal justice reforms to end mass incarceration. There are more black innovators in tech, film, and business than ever before, and we saw the election of the first African-American president in our nation's history, a feat so many thought that they'd never live to see. The right to vote is foundational to our democracy, but for us, it is a hard-won right. And the NAACP has played a vital role in the battle for this right, and for many other civil rights we must never take for granted. 55 years ago, black people could not vote. We could not hold elected office. We need to work every single day to defend the right to vote, and we must exercise that precious right by voting in every single election. There's a hope, my brothers and sisters. There is hope. Last November, voters in Florida chose to automatically restore voting rights to convicted felons who have served their sentence in fully. Over 1 million Floridians were re-enfranchised because of tireless work of organizers and energized voters across the state. We need to make this happen not just in Florida, not just in the South, but across the country. Lawmakers in this country have a responsibility to improve criminal justice policies, and there are exciting reforms happening at the state and local levels. California has begun expunging marijuana convictions from records and reducing sentences. In Philadelphia and in Atlanta, the courts have stopped cash bail for low-level misdemeanor offenses and begun converting drug offenders into treatment centers rather than to jail. But every American needs to use their power and privilege to reform the system. We must show up on election day and elect men and women who will end mass incarceration and do away with the vestiges of slavery, which is what mass incarceration in America really is all about. And when our opponents try to take away our right to vote, Sarah Riggs Amico, y'all got to hear about what happened in the lieutenant governor's race and the undercount that took place. If you ever get a chance to hear her explain what happened, you need to do that. But we appreciate you being here, Sarah Riggs Amico. When our opponents try to take away our right to vote, or try to make it harder for us to vote, or try to convince us that voting doesn't really matter, we must fight back harder. We must stand up for our rights. Look around at your neighbors. It's not enough to exercise your right to vote. Each of us needs to ensure that everyone else has access to their equal rights under the law. People who try to keep black men and women from voting, laws with a disparate impact on our community, these should be and must be remnants of the past. Amen. We deserve to move beyond them in our lifetimes, and I commit to fighting for that future every day that I'm in Congress. Together with the NAACP Act So, Black Lives Matter, and other groups leading the fight, we will win, and we will truly make America great for all of her citizens. Free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, free at last. And y'all are free from my long speech. Thank you.